Olá, muito bom dia a todos que acompanham as ações do CEFET-MG por nossos canais nas redes sociais. Meu nome é Cristina Carvalho, sou secretária de Relações Internacionais do CEFET-MG. A partir de agora, damos início ao webinário que abre as atividades do International Day do CEFET. Este é um evento que foi muito sonhado por nós e feito para vocês. A preparação nos permitiu identificar tantas experiências, tantas pessoas da instituição envolvidas com a internacionalização e querendo compartilhar com matérias bastante relevantes, que só o dia 30, o dia de hoje, não nos permite transmitir todas essas informações. Por isso, a partir de sugestão da SECOM, que foi nossa parceira na organização do evento, estamos expandindo as apresentações para os dias 1 e 2 de outubro, com a transmissão de gravações, e convidamos todos a nos acompanhar. Para a abertura oficial do nosso webinário, eu convido o professor Flávio Santos, diretor-geral do CEFET-MG. Bom dia, professor Flávio Santos. Seja bem-vindo e, desde já, eu agradeço a sua participação.
Eu quero agradecer o convite, professora Cristina Carvalho, cumprimentar toda a equipe da Secretaria de Relações Internacionais do CEFET Minas, por esse trabalho que vem desenvolvendo, fundamental para que a instituição ela alcance ainda um patamar mais elevado. O International Day é uma iniciativa proposta pela Secretaria e aprovada pelo Conselho Diretor do CEFET Minas, em reconhecimento a todo esse processo de internacionalização da instituição. O CEFET, há mais de 30 anos, ele vem participando de projetos de intercâmbio de alunos, está envolvido com diversas universidades estrangeiras, um histórico forte de cooperação, especialmente com a Alemanha, mas que nos últimos anos, eu diria na última década, esse processo aprofundou, ele avançou de maneira muito consistente e muito importante. Não só no intercâmbio de alunos, mas também na cooperação em projetos de pesquisa. Então, esse International Day, ele vem, de algum modo, além, não é, do reconhecimento pela importância da internacionalização, ele vem também coroar um processo que vem se desenvolvendo, como eu disse, há várias décadas. Eu quero destacar, obviamente, que não só a importância que tem o intercâmbio internacional para a formação dos nossos alunos, mas também para que a gente reconheça nas outras culturas um valor incomensurável. Não é? A língua, como elemento forte da cultura dos povos, ela é fundamental e, nesse sentido, o International Day tem valorizado muito a língua inglesa como um meio de instrução, como não é, o Is Emi é um exemplo disso, também tão necessário para esse processo de internacionalização. Eu diria que nós ainda temos muitos passos para serem dados, mas o mais importante deles é que a nossa comunidade ela esteja conscientizada para todo esse processo. É importante que a administração central ela elabore, possa prover os meios para que a gente avance da maneira mais rápida possível. Então, saúdo a todos, a toda a equipe. Eu quero, de modo especial, cumprimentar a Dom Bilovski pelo trabalho que vem desenvolvendo junto com a Secretaria, a todos os professores e técnicos que estão envolvidos nesse processo, na certeza de que esse trabalho todo, não é, de intercâmbio, de internacionalização, numa perspectiva um pouco mais ampla, ele vai trazer frutos ainda mais relevantes para a nossa instituição, para o CEFET Minas. Hoje, no cenário nacional, o CEFET é uma instituição que está no mais elevado ranking do Ministério da Educação, ele tem nota máxima na avaliação institucional, e, Por óbvio, isso traz para a instituição uma alegria muito grande, porque isso é resultado do trabalho de tantos, mas também traz um desafio associado, que é o de galgar um novo patamar. E esse novo patamar, eu diria que ele só é possível pelo processo de internacionalização. Então, parabéns a toda a equipe, desejo sucesso nesse evento e que a gente chegue lá no menor tempo possível. Obrigado e vamos adiante.
Muito obrigado, professor Flávio, por suas palavras. Realmente a intenção é que a gente envolva toda a comunidade do CEFET, né? O corpo discente, docentes, técnicos administrativos, e a intenção desse International Day realmente marcada pela aprovação do Conselho Diretor, a inserção no calendário, mas a gente gostaria muito que as atividades elas se mantivessem ao longo do ano, e daí, então, o nosso convite para a professora Dalbikowski para dar mais uma palestra para nós, especialmente para aqueles que não puderam participar do curso de EMAI, que já vai se iniciar agora a partir das 11 horas. Eu convido agora a professora Celeste Costa, nossa vice-diretora, que já está chegando aí. Olá, professora, bom dia, seja bem-vinda.
Bom dia, Cristina, obrigada. Bom dia, Flávio, bom dia a todas e a todos que nos assistem, né? Inicialmente, Cristina, quero te agradecer mais uma vez, né, de estar aqui com você, agradecer toda a sua equipe, né, a equipe da SRI, pela organização deste evento, que é um evento que vem com uma programação pensada em contemplar as diversas atividades e os diversos atores envolvidos no processo de internacionalização do CEFET, né? Nesse evento, será tratado da metodologia do EMAI, né, que tem como objetivo preparar os nossos docentes para ministrarem o conteúdo de suas disciplinas em língua inglesa, contempla a parceria com a Embaixada da França, contempla os desafios de internacionalização da educação, contempla as nossas experiências de mobilidade na Alemanha, das nossas potencialidades de parceria com outros países, né, do programa de português como língua estrangeira, a pós-graduação em engenharia de materiais e sobre os estágios e experiências internacionais, né. E, além disso, olhando pela programação, né, nós vamos ter, ao longo de toda a semana, a exibição de vídeos feitos por alunos, professores, mostrando um pouco da experiência com algum aspecto da internacionalização, bem como as parcerias que temos com o Instituto Confuso e com o programa IAEST. Então, é isso, eu convido a todos para participarem de todas as atividades que foram preparadas para fomentar e divulgar o nosso processo e o nosso progresso de internacionalização, né? Pois é importante enfatizar, Cristina, que a internacionalização hoje, ela não é mais uma opção, mas sim uma necessidade, né, para todas as instituições comprometidas com a qualidade de ensino, pesquisa e extensão. Então, eu agradeço a oportunidade de estar participando desse evento e desejo que todos sejam muito bem-vindos, né, ao longo deste evento, que terá aí 3 dias de programação, não é isso? E eu queria deixar essa mensagem. Muito obrigada.
Exatamente isso. Muito obrigada, professora Celeste, por suas palavras. Realmente a gente fez um compromisso com a diretoria no sentido de tentar institucionalizar as ações que a Secretaria de Relações Internacionais ela já vinha desenvolvendo há muito tempo, mas eram através de projetos, muitas ações, projetos de extensão, e a gente, então, conseguiu fazer algumas coisas, como eu vou começar a falar aqui um pouquinho para vocês, né, para vocês que estão nos ouvindo, eu inicio convidando a todos que explorem nossa página, né, sri@cefet-mg.br, e lá a gente tem disponível todos os acordos que a gente já tem firmados, todas as ações que a gente vem desenvolvendo. Eu gostaria de falar que, desde o início, a gente buscou planejar um International Day que envolvesse toda a comunidade. Aliás, eu já disse isso no início, né, da minha fala. Mas de uma maneira que essa pandemia nos permitiu mais facilmente envolver todas as unidades do CEFET, porque esse podemos dizer que é um lado bom, né, da comunicação remota. E a ideia é que a gente envolva também os 3 níveis de ensino, né, o nível técnico, a graduação e a pós-graduação, e os setores administrativos. O evento busca, então, divulgar as ações internacionais e ser um momento de discussão e reflexão sobre o contexto da internacionalização, não só a nível local, mas a nível nacional e a nível global. Acordos que permitem as cooperações tecnológicas, a melhoria da qualidade do ensino e a formação do indivíduo e a ampliação da capacidade competitiva dos estudantes e da instituição são foco do trabalho da SRI. Da mesma maneira, a mobilidade docente-discente em todos os níveis de ensino e pesquisa, e também a capacitação dos técnicos administrativos. Então, nos últimos anos, a gente tem colocado mais energia para esse tipo de trabalho, para fazer acordos específicos, especialmente que envolvam os alunos do nível técnico e os servidores técnico-administrativos, que não eram tão, digamos assim, tão comum, né, dentre os acordos anteriormente firmados. A dupla diplomação e a cotutela já são realidade e têm sido implementados junto aos parceiros atuais e a novos parceiros. Essa semana passada mesmo, a gente teve um contato de mais um professor para mais um programa de cotutela, me parece que já é o 5º ou 6º que a gente está firmando esse ano. As políticas internacional e linguística institucionais também têm sido debatido internamente e entre outras instituições federais de ensino. A nossa página foi reestruturada e está disponibilizando, além das oportunidades e das informações, ferramentas, materiais, aulas, links, que permitem a melhoria da qualidade das ações interculturais. Então, um exemplo disso são todos os links que a professora Down disponibilizou no curso de EMI que ela ofereceu no primeiro semestre, e isso tudo está lá na página. Então, as pessoas que não tiveram a oportunidade de assistir, elas podem acessar, né, estão disponibilizadas. Atualmente, nossos esforços estão focados na criação de uma newsletter com os depoimentos de experiências internacionais acadêmicas e também com o apoio da DTI para a tradução da nossa página, que entendemos que permitirá ampliar novos horizontes e, como o professor Flávio falou, nos colocar em um patamar mais elevado no sentido de contato, né, com os nossos parceiros internacionais. Como exemplo de nossas ações concretas em 2020, além da manutenção e a capacitação de novos acordos, que eu já mencionei há pouco, eu gostaria de citar o curso de EMI, que já falamos sobre ele, e ele foi ofertado para todos os docentes de todos os campi, que foi permitido pela comunicação remota, que infelizmente estamos nela, mas nós soubemos tirar proveito disso, e foi muito interessante possibilitar A participação, a gente teve professores envolvidos de todos os campi do CEFET, né? E também firmamos com isso a parceria com a Embaixada dos Estados Unidos, que até então não tínhamos ações com eles. Uma segunda ação foi o curso de metodologias ativas aplicadas ao ensino de Emi, que foi elaborado com a colaboração do Departamento de Educação do CEFET, então as professoras Adélia e Luciana participaram intensamente e tivemos 130 professores envolvidos. Isso dá uma satisfação muito grande para a gente na hora que a gente prepara e propõe as atividades. Uma outra coisa que eu gostaria de pontuar é a manutenção de nossos docentes e discentes em mobilidade durante esse período da pandemia. Então, todos aqueles que manifestaram interesse e justificaram, obviamente, isso tudo foi acordado com os parceiros, todos aqueles que quiseram renovar e continuar por mais um semestre, nós fizemos um trabalho e, juntamente com a Diretoria-Geral do CEFET, foi concedido. O quarto ponto é o fortalecimento da parceria com a Embaixada da França, né, para uma maior difusão de cursos de francês para todos os campi do CEFET. Então, também por essa questão facilitada pela comunicação remota, desde o primeiro semestre, os cursos de francês em todos os níveis passaram a ser oferecidos para todos os campi, né? Coisa que anteriormente a gente não tinha condição. Queríamos muito, desde 2018, tentamos novos leitores de francês, mas não conseguimos, infelizmente. Dessa maneira, agora a gente conseguiu e estamos mantendo agora no segundo semestre. E também será divulgado hoje na palestra das 14h30 o programa FranMove, que é uma iniciativa da Embaixada da França, e esse programa ele é destinado àqueles alunos do início do curso de graduação e que têm interesse em fazer mobilidade em países francofônicos. Então, esse curso ele é de 4 semestres, e todos aqueles alunos que têm interesse, eles poderão participar. Inclusive, ele já iniciou, eu convido aqueles que têm interesse, né, em conhecer um pouco mais, a participar dessa live que vai acontecer hoje, com os parceiros da Embaixada da França, a partir das 14h30. Um quinto ponto que foi muito importante para nós esse ano foi a aprovação do programa de português como língua estrangeira. Como eu disse a vocês, diversas ações já aconteciam desde 97, no sentido do ensino de língua como português, no ensino de português como língua estrangeira. E nos últimos anos a gente já oferecia cursos de português como língua de acolhimento, cursos de formação de professores de português como língua estrangeira, mas o ano passado nós trabalhamos muito com o pessoal do Deltec e do DEDC, que nos auxiliou, conseguimos transformar esses projetos de extensão em um programa institucional. E isso também é uma ação muito gratificante para nós, a partir do momento que a gente institucionaliza essas ações. Esta também será um objeto de uma outra live amanhã, mas amanhã nós vamos divulgar os horários corretamente, convidamos a todos a participar. E, como sexta ação, é essa organização do International Day. Para esse evento, nós sugerimos diversas atividades a serem desenvolvidas na ponta, como atividades nas disciplinas em outros idiomas. nós fizemos reunião a pedido, né, contato com todos os diretores de todos os nossos campi. Nós formamos uma comissão composta por 2 professores e um servidor de cada um dos campi. Então, a gente discutiu como que a gente poderia implementar esse International Day, não só com a participação de diversos servidores do CEFET, mas também envolvendo alunos e ex-alunos, e temos vários vídeos curtos, de no máximo 3 minutos, que estão disponibilizados no YouTube do CEFET, e estimulamos também, sugerimos como que os professores poderiam iniciar, né, principalmente usando ferramentas e recursos, né, do IEMI, e também os funcionários, né, sugerimos, quem sabe vocês procuram algumas palavras técnicas em inglês porque é a língua acadêmica, mas pode ser em outras línguas também, e tirem 10 minutos, 15 minutos, meia hora, discutam entre vocês, treinem pronúncia e tudo mais. A gente entende que isso pode enriquecer e ajudar no processo de preparar a nossa instituição para que ela esteja pronta ou mais receptiva, né? Ela se torne interessante para nossos parceiros internacionais. Então, nós planejamos palestras, bate-papos, mesas redondas e debates com convidados, docentes, discentes e ex-alunos. Inclusive, com os ex-alunos, é um pequeno passo para a construção da rede alumni do CEFET-MG, e a gente busca mostrar oportunidades de estágio, de experiência de trabalho em outros países, de mobilidade, para todos aqueles interessados. O nosso recado é o seguinte: a gente tem muitas possibilidades. É possível, né, as pessoas que têm interesse, participar. Lembramos também que a internacionalização, como política institucional, ela amplia as capacidades estruturais e conjunturais, interagindo sempre com o ensino, a pesquisa e a extensão. As oportunidades interculturais permitem reconsiderar, adaptar, aprender sempre, por meio de novos olhares e buscar novas ferramentas de se relacionar consigo próprio e com o mundo, especialmente nesse momento. Mas a gente gostaria de lembrar que não existe internacionalização sem o aprendizado e, consequentemente, sem o ensino de línguas. É necessário que as instituições se preparem, especialmente o CEFET-MG, né, para participar de uma comunidade global e para receber estrangeiros. Nós buscamos a internacionalização em casa, como um projeto de vida, um projeto institucional, avaliando com responsabilidade a sua importância, seus valores, estratégias e metas para alcançá-lo. Bom, como eu já disse, eu gostaria de agradecer, porque nós contamos com a participação de diversos servidores de todas as unidades, e contamos muito com o apoio de colegas, como o pessoal da SECOM, né, e especialmente ao Luiz Eduardo Pacheco, que nos orientou diversas coisas, ao Júlio Sardinha, que esteve e está, nesse momento, nos bastidores de todas as nossas emissões, lives e gravações, André Rodrigues, que preparou com muito cuidado a nossa arte, né, a gente reviu muita coisa, foi um trabalho, a Radija, que fez a edição de diversos vídeos, tudo que está postado no YouTube para vocês, e as tradutoras de Libra, Laís Barbosa e Maiara Marinho. Então, eu vou terminar a minha fala agora, convidando vocês para aguardar mais 5 minutos, quando começaremos a palestra com a professora Dalbikovski, Bykowski. E eu gostaria muito de dizer que realmente foi um evento preparado com muito carinho, com muita atenção, com o envolvimento de muitas pessoas. Vocês nos dirão se nós conseguimos atingir o nosso objetivo. Muito obrigada, continuem aí, que em mais 4 minutos a professora Dawn já estará conosco. Aguardamos as 11 horas para cumprir com o nosso horário. Eu vou falar para vocês, aqueles que estão nos acompanhando, o nosso cronograma de atividades. Então, agora teremos The Importance of English as a Medium of Instruction, com a professora Dawn. In few minutes, we are calling her. À tarde, nós teremos uma mesa redonda, que vai tratar de la diffusion de la francophonie, une expérience réussie entre l'ambassade de France e le CEFET-MG. Depois, às 17h30, teremos uma palestra com a professora Luciane Stalivieri, que vai falar para nós sobre a internacionalização na educação, que prepara o CEFET-MG para nossos novos desafios. Na agenda, a partir de amanhã, nossas atividades estão gravadas, serão transmissões gravadas, mas os convidados estarão online para que a gente possa interagir com os participantes. Então, amanhã, às 14 horas, teremos uma mesa redonda que vai tratar da mobilidade na Alemanha, experiências, desafios e possibilidades. Depois, às 16 horas, teremos uma transmissão gravada, as potencialidades de mobilidade internacional com os países de habla hispana. Embora a ideia seja a discussão sobre os países de língua espanhola e essa internacionalização, ela será mais em português do que em espanhol. E ainda amanhã, às 19 horas, nós teremos a apresentação do programa Português como Língua Estrangeira, o foco na interculturalidade. E na sexta-feira, para o último dia, né, do nosso evento, então nós teremos uma transmissão gravada às 10 horas, que trata da pós-graduação em Engenharia de Materiais, experiências, perspectivas e desafios. E às 15 horas é a nossa última transmissão gravada, onde nós vamos tratar dos estágios e experiências internacionais, experiências, desafios e possibilidades, que já é uma sementinha da nossa rede alumni, que nós teremos 3 alunos ex-alunos do CEFET, com as experiências dele, que estarão para nós. Bom, from now on, I invited Professor Dawn Bykowski to talk about the importance of English as a medium of instruction, EMI, for internationalization. Professor Dawn is former director of the Academic and Global Communication Program in the Linguistics Department at Ohio University. She has decades of experience teaching English in the US and internationally, and also extensive developing and leading teachers training on topics related to language education and global education. Professor Dawn, are you listening us? Can you join us?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so thank you again, and it's a pleasure to have you in another event in CEFET, at CEFET-MG.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you for bringing me back again. I very much enjoyed the other project that we did together, working with all the teachers there and also getting to know all of you a little bit better. So it was a great project. So it's nice to be back virtually working with you all. So yeah, thank you so much. And let's spend some time then talking about EMI and its importance within the realm of internationalization. So the way I like to handle this topic is from a more specific angle, not just theoretical. So trying to make this as applied as possible. As mentioned, I do enjoy teacher training. In fact, I'm no longer at Ohio University. I've moved to the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center in Monterey, California. And as an associate professor here, I also do quite a bit of program evaluation and teacher training. So it's certainly one of my loves and something that I've been able to do across the world. And the way I like to do it is to start to think just in general, what specifically are we talking about? And then moving to specifics and some ideas on how to plan and do strategy. So what is EMI? EMI is the use of English to teach academic subjects in countries or jurisdictions where the first language of the majority of the population is not English. Situations like in Brazil, of course, many other countries right now. You can see a picture there where I did a project in Vietnam, and I was talking with faculty there, doing some planning, and that is an important part, planning for how to make your EMI projects work. So EMI is happening all over the world where you might have students from the same language background that isn't English, or many different language backgrounds, but the content is delivered in English. Now, what is EMI not? It is not ESP. ESP is English for specific purposes, and that's a focus on English, actually. There is certainly some content is learned, but the focus is on the English. EMI, the focus is on the content itself, and that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that EMI professors are not expected to be teaching just English teachers. They're not just all of a sudden English teachers, right? But actually content experts. But they are going to need some special considerations because the content is going to be taught in a language different from what the student population is used to. CLIL, you might have heard as well. This is content and language integrated learning. And this is typically used more within K-12 or kind of like secondary education. And actually, it doesn't have to be English. It could be any language. And there's kind of more of a balance between both language and content. So now we understand kind of a ground rules of what we're talking about with EMI. And then the question is, why EMI? And this is very important to consider because students are practical. They want to know, why should they do something? Why should they spend their time? Increasingly, students want reasons for the whys that are grounded in non-theoretical concepts. So they want to know why related to their future lives or careers. So why EMI? Well, it can raise the English proficiency level of the country and provide a well-qualified bilingual workforce. So countries want to be able to lure international businesses or different, job forces so they can have more jobs and higher paying jobs for country's development. And English is one way to lure them in, and one way to get the English up is to have EMI programs. And that is specifically for English that is used not to pass a grammar test, but English that can be used for specific needs within the workplace, giving presentations. The picture here is, maybe discussing projects in English. It could be giving, writing reports in English. It could just be reading emails and responding, whatever the needs are for that English. And also, one that is also important to many, many campuses is to promote international exchange or to internationalize a campus. This has to do with, well, what are the benefits that having a more international campus brings to your program or your institution? And that's an important thing to think of. What does it do for yourself as a teacher, as an educator, as a researcher? What does it do for your student population? What are the reasons you're bringing more international students to your institution? And for many people, it has to do with intercultural communication, being more comfortable working with people from other backgrounds, being more comfortable, certainly working in English, being more comfortable exchanging ideas and being aware of kind of how the world works globally so that you feel more comfortable with those situations, the new perspectives that international students bring. Also, EMI can really raise the quality and prestige of educational programs and often generate revenue. But it should be kept in mind that nothing is free, and even though more revenue can be generated with EMI, more costs are going to be incurred as well, such as for extra support services. Many times, the people who teach EMI courses are paid more, so there will be more costs as well. And students can become a lot more competitive in the job market, so they want programs that are in English because this helps them with their own skill set. And it can help many students stay motivated in class. Many students have worked hard to learn English anyway, and they're interested in more internationally focused jobs, whether they're at home working with international companies or moving out of the country. And they want to be able to use that English, and so that's very motivating for them. So within the realm of internationalization initiatives and EMI, I wanted to just point out a couple things about that specifically. I like this quote because it has a couple things that I bolded here about internationalization initiatives. The first is, you'll notice, intentional, the word intentional. So it is the intentional integration of a dimension that is basically global. I like to think about intentional because that means we have a lot of planning that is going into these programs, not kind of just put together quickly, but thinking through really, why are we doing this? And then based on the whys, we'll figure out the hows. And then that helps us gain increasing attention from your Brazilian higher education institutions as a real strategy to improve the teaching and research in your country. So this is, again, coming to the whys people are engaging in internationalization initiatives. Important to think about that quality component as well, that the quality of your programs is going to be something you really want to consider. You don't want to put something together, obviously, that would have a negative impact on your quality. You want to keep that quality up. So who is doing EMI? Well, it started with former British colonies, since they had the English, but now it's really spread to just many different countries around the world who are looking to build a more international workforce. I've done projects, like I mentioned, in Vietnam and then also in Brazil, and I've done types of webinars and online courses throughout really the rest of the world. So you're seeing many varieties. It is not a situation where it's one size fits all. It's not, we could do a whole nother session on all the different ways you can do EMI. We don't really have time for that today, but keep in mind, if you wonder, well, what's the right way? There's really no just one right way. You just want to make sure that you decide why you're doing things and how you're going to create a plan and some programs that help you meet those goals. Both private and public universities are doing EMI, but it's more common in private ones. And both private and public secondary schools are doing EMI, but it's more common in public ones. So it's happening everywhere. course, there are many challenges. Many people are concerned that there will be a loss of the native language. So maybe students will speak so much English that they will start to lose their native language, and that's a valid concern. No one is advocating for that. It should just be, English should just be another medium of accomplishing goals. That's really one way to think of this too, is related to the second challenge, which can be maintaining relationships between you as the instructor and then your students. Using the native language is a very good way to maintain those relationships. So EMI classes don't mean that you are not going to have any English whatsoever. Any native language whatsoever, but rather that you're going to be strategic about how you're going to choose when you're going to be using, for example, Portuguese, and using it with specific situations where you want to maintain your relationship with your students is one great strategy. Another challenge is students can be insufficiently prepared. So maybe they don't have the background knowledge in studying kind of how to study in English, or maybe just their English level itself cannot be where it needs to be in order to learn the content. Students might be shy about speaking English in class, or just in general about their English. Maybe their English is fine, they're just shy about it. It can be hard to find effective materials or content and assessment tools that are in English in the content area you want, with the focus you want, at the level of English that you want. No one is saying that the English materials have to be at a very, very high proficiency level of English. So it depends, again, on what your students need to be able to do by the time they exit your program. It can be harder for students to have to learn the content in a non-native language. So, just the whole process of learning, you might need to trim back the amount of content that you teach within your course. Assessment can definitely be tricky. A student might not pass a test, for example, and you might wonder, well, did they not pass because they didn't know the content? Or did they not pass because they didn't really know the English that they needed to display and demonstrate what they know about the content? Another challenge is large class sizes. So typically you want to keep your classes smaller for EMI programs, and they can be extra work and time for the instructor, which means that many instructors do want to be paid more and are paid more for these classes. And especially when programs are being initiated, they frequently will have a lighter load so that they have a little more time to get everything up and running before they can kind of take on more work. Now, these are many challenges that you just want to, not to scare you away, but rather to help you think about how you can plan with these challenges in mind, but still make a plan that is successful for you. And I'm sure you'll think of many other challenges as well. So that brings me back to planning. I say it's all about planning, and I put a picture of a chess set here because I oftentimes think that that's how these types of projects are. When you make a little bit of a plan, you have to think about not only the immediate chess move in front of you, but you have to think about down the line. And that's what you want to do as you're making your internationalization plan, which includes EMI. How are you going to plan for the future so that you have the better chance for success or winning the game? And that's at 3 levels for planning: institutional plans and policies, departmental plans and policies, and then for the individual course. And I'll say, working with institutions and professors, teachers all around the world, that oftentimes the part that is missing most often is the institutional and departmental plans and policies. All too often, instructors are just tasked with putting together some EMI courses, and that institutional piece is missing, and that is going to make things more difficult for success in the long run. So what are some things to consider for institutional plans? Well, you can think of some policies that you might want to be considering, such as who can teach EMI courses. Are there requirements for the instructors based on not only their content background and accomplishments, but also their English proficiency? Some institutions require instructors who do EMI courses to have a degree from an institution that's an international institution, international PhD program, for example, and that's fine. In addition, you might want to consider how comfortable the instructor would be with just communicating in English. You know, getting a degree at an English institution may or may not mean the person is comfortable really teaching in English, because now we're talking about a different way of teaching. Another policy can be to consider who can take EMI courses. Are there requirements for admission? So just like you're thinking about requirements for instructors, requirements for students. Some institutions require a certain test score that students have to achieve before they are allowed into an EMI program. Some places have students take a series of courses that they have to pass with certain grades before they are able to join the EMI program. So there are different ways to do it. Some places honestly just say whoever wants to sign up can sign up, and we'll do the best we can. But if you just open it wide open where there's no requirements for students, obviously that is going to put a certain new set of challenges on the instructor and the institution, thinking again about long-term and quality and reputation that you're just going to want to be aware of. Another type of policy question you can ask yourself is, will there be exit requirements based on both content and language? If you think about what students have to be able to do by the time they exit the program, like I mentioned, maybe they have to be able to sit in business meetings in English and not only listen and understand, but contribute in the business meeting, then what kinds of exit exams or requirements, scenarios can you have that are similar to that kind of situation? So when students have a degree from your institution, they can base, you are saying, we certify that this person can engage in this skill. Okay, so what are some exit requirements you might want to have? And then that gives students also the understanding that they're working towards something that is very much tied to their future, so that they know in all of their courses that they have a direction they're going to. They're going to have to perform this exit requirement in English, and that they had better be preparing for that throughout their coursework. And that gives your institution the opportunity to plan throughout the coursework at that departmental level. And that brings us to the second part of the slide here, plans. So again, what is the purpose for your EMI courses or programs at your institution? Sometimes I'll ask that question to a group of faculty and they'll say, well, English is just really important today. Students must have English. And when I ask why, there isn't a very concrete answer. The more concrete you can be with why students really need English, and I've given a couple examples based on specific things they need to do with the English, the more concrete you can be, the easier it is going to be for you to sell this notion to students to help keep them motivated, and then also to make plans to help you decide on the choices you're going to have on how to plan this instruction and plan your course. When it comes to planning, it's nice not only to have a course plan for one specific course, but at the departmental level. So if you know that students have to take a certain number of courses within your department before they graduate, then making a list of all the things they need to know and be able to do, not only in English, but with content as well, making that list and then deciding where they're going to do each one of those things to make sure that students have that broad range of experiences that you want them to have. That's complicated departmental planning, but can really pay off in the long run in terms of student appreciation and motivation, and in terms of quality of your program. Another plan, which programs will offer EMI courses. Some institutions just have one department or one school or something like that, or just a few courses, depends. Also, what level of students will you have, both graduate students or undergraduate students? You can also ask yourself, what types of support services or offices will you have for the instructors and for the students who are in the EMI program? So instructors will need some training, will benefit from training. In general, I'm a big believer in faculty development. There's always so much we can learn from each other, and it keeps us fresh. and excited about the pedagogy part of being in the classroom, but especially with EMI, some extra professional development is going to be very useful, and because for many instructors, this is a very different way of teaching, and we'll get to that in a minute, because it really involves a very student-focused learning environment. So teacher training and specific help on specific things, not that really abstract teacher training, but on specific things having to do with assessment and lecturing and things like that, and building your syllabus. But also for students, will you offer, for example, some kind of academic tutoring in English, maybe a writing center? These types of tutoring services are very common in the US, less common in other countries, but especially for EMI programs, if your students are going to succeed, many of them are going to benefit from tutoring. And again, that relates back to, you might say, well, what kind of tutoring? Well, that relates to what you want students to be able to do with their English. If they're writing reports, they're probably going to need writing tutors. Writing is complicated for everybody. So that's an extra expense, but it is also an opportunity to really be innovative within this particular market in this field right now. So now let's talk about, we talked kind of about the institutional level, department level. Let's talk about making EMI work in your own classes. I have a couple of questions for you to consider. Just ask yourself. Teachers of EMI courses should, so you've got 4 options here, A, B, C, D. Should they reduce or increase the amount of time they lecture, and reduce or increase the amount of time students are actively involved in the class? So what do we think? Should they reduce or increase their lecture time, and then reduce or increase the students being active in class part? Well, we want to reduce the amount of time having just a long lecture and increase student involvement. You know, listening to lectures, you're probably already tired just listening here. Listening to lectures in another language can be exhausting, leads to fatigue. It's very easy in any listening situation to become distracted and space off a little bit, but especially when it's a non-native language, it's very easy to drift away. So keeping that in mind, it doesn't mean students are lazy or that they don't care. It's just a reality. In general, you know, educational science recommends having shorter listening and lectures anyway, but especially in EMI courses. And then that gives you some time to do more active learning with students in class. So more active learning includes different types of interactive activities that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay, one more question. Preparation for teaching an EMI course includes which one of these? Content and materials, pedagogy, which is how you teach and structure your class, delivery of lectures, or all of the above? What do you think? Yeah, almost always, whenever there's the opportunity for an all of the above, it always is, right? So preparation includes all of these things. What are the materials you're going to be using? Finding appropriate materials. For many instructors and programs, this is one of the most challenging aspects, because the books that are written for example, for an American undergraduate student in biology, is hard for an American undergraduate student in biology to learn from. Is it realistic to expect students in your program, do they have that level of English? And if they don't have it, then that is going to be an ongoing challenge. So being kind of honest with yourself in that planning process. And many programs do build their own materials for this reason, which takes time and money, but then once they're built, they are built. And with online programs, this becomes more feasible. And then, of course, how you're going to teach and deliver lectures as well is going to be very important to plan and opportunities for training. So what are 3 best practices that you can try today? We'll briefly touch on each one of these. A good thing to start with is to assess students' needs in studying content in English. Then you can move to supporting those needs. And then finally, you can really prioritize that interactivity. So the first thing, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I do think that this is one of the areas that if you can get this down, it is going to help drive your whole program. It's really just needs assessment. So why don't you, first thing you can do is just write down as many reasons as you can think of for why your students should bother to learn English. Remember, you want to make that as specific as possible. It might be that your students need English for business meetings with non-Portuguese, speakers or from whatever language background. It might be that your students need English to write reports for international companies. Maybe they need English to read technical papers or industry research. If you don't have any reasons for this that are concrete, students will figure it out and they will get frustrated and feel like it is just too much work to learn the content in English, and motivation can go down quickly. And one of the hardest things with EMI courses is maintaining that motivation and really making it seem English and the content to seem alive. So you want to start with that. Once you can also be thinking of then, once you know what are the things students need to do with their English, then you can ask yourself, okay, well, within that, what are the specific English skills that they're going to need in their future or their career? If you don't know the answer to that question, that's fine. You can take some time to investigate yourself. Look at job advertisements, talk to other people who are working in the field who would have similar positions. Maybe you have some former students who you could talk to as well. You could read different industry reports online. Just do as much information gathering on this as you can. And then think to yourself, where do you think your students will enter with those skills? So I mentioned many programs do have language requirements, but you might have to guess to some degree on this. If you use the Common European Framework, and you might say, well, our students are going to come in at a B1 or a B2 or whatever it might be, then get to know that English level and remember that that's where your students are starting. So what this is doing is helping you think, okay, this is the goal for students, and here's where they're starting. And that means you can do number 4, which is you're identifying that gap. So this is the opportunity for you to pitch your content in English and teach students. That's the opportunity space that you have. And then there's always too much to do in any class, so you can prioritize which of those skills you think the students need the most, understanding that you can't do it all, and so that will help you identify the topics that you think you're going to need to cover for your class, and then that can help you develop a plan so that you put together not only your content, but then those English skills as well moving forward, and thinking about the kind of support students will need, probably with vocabulary development within the field. They'll probably need some support with just that sustained listening and catching main ideas, catching details, being able to ask questions in English, a very much not just test-based English to pass an exam, but interactive English. That means that you're really trying to have honest communication. And for many programs, it needs to be very detailed communication as well. So that can be your first step. The next thing that you can really think is, how can you support your students through that process? And I like to think of the different roles that EMI instructors have. And I put a few of them there. I mentioned that I'm living in California now, so I stuck in a beautiful big picture of San Francisco Bridge there. I'm a little bit south of San Francisco. And some of the things that we can think about, really, I like to think of the bridge builder. But first, let's talk about some of the other ones, is as the instructor being a facilitator. In many courses, and this really has to do with the pedagogy component, and some of it has to do with specific departments or fields are more teacher-centered, some are more student-centered, can have to do with cultural backgrounds. There are just a lot of things that can influence this, but generally speaking, there is a move within education to move away from teacher-fronted classes into more student-centered instruction, which doesn't mean that the instructor is useless or that the instructor doesn't know anything. It's just a different way of teaching that involves these roles, such as facilitator. So being someone who is creating learning spaces and facilitating learning and allowing students to kind of pick up the ball. If you imagine someone who's running a relay race, and you have one of those batons that you pass off. Sometimes I think of it that way, that an instructor is passing the baton of learning off to the student, but very much supporting the student through the process, giving them the kinds of experiences in the classroom, putting them in touch with different experts in the field. And that brings us to the next one, content expert. So you are always going to be the content expert for sure, but that doesn't mean that you're just going to only stand there and deliver and talk and say information, but rather think to yourself, here's the information that I know the students need, and here's the skills that I want them to be able to things to do, and then instead of just telling them, how can you create situations where students can experience that themselves? Support coach students will need tips on how to learn and study in English. They'll need some help with motivation. So supporting them through the process, being aware of their shyness, for example. You're all taking a big risk in this situation, and students really appreciate it when they see their instructor be a real person and admit the different times that they've had faced risks, or felt like it was just too challenging as well. And being a role model for sure, and a bridge builder into students' future. The more you can tie students to that future, the better. You might invite in, for example, experts from the field who can come to your course, whether it be in person or virtually, to talk about how their hard work learning English and the content is going to pay off in the end. Talking about what they do in their jobs that the students can start to practice right now, so that students can feel like they're have that bridge into the future, maybe even making connections. You can have people from the industry or whoever the students' future careers are. You can have them record videos for your students that they could watch. You could have them write letters, or kind of write up some information students could read, like case studies. The nice thing with those kinds of that kind of content is you can keep reusing that every time. After students graduate, you can keep in touch with them, and you can ask them to write letters back to your current population. And maybe I've seen instructors do like a letter to their former self, the letter they had wished they had when they were in school, which can be very powerful for your students as well. So thinking to yourself about how you can help make the content alive and connected to students' future. Some other responsibilities then of EMI instructors: you're going to plan and lead student-centered learning. You're going to find and utilize as much authentic content in English and authentic activities and assessments as possible. That means instead of only asking students to do some kind of multiple choice test, you can do some of those, but I would recommend not only those, because it's very hard for a multiple choice test to demonstrate how well a student can perform one of those things we talked about in English. So having them do presentations in English, having them maybe run a meeting in English, practice leading a discussion in English. All those different things can be part of your assessment portfolio, but that does come down to class size. If you have very large classes, really it's unfair to expect instructors to be able to do these things. So that's why the planning is really important, and the trust and support from the institutional and instructor levels. Yeah, you want to be able to do your part to motivate your students. They have to do their part, but you have to do your part too. So you can ask yourself, which motivation techniques can you try next week? Which small things can you try? Many EMI instructors I've worked with have first tried some of these strategies in their classes in their native language, and then they expand those strategies to be able to use them in their EMI courses. There's no reason that these types of teaching strategies are only for EMI. They can also be used in any language, right? So that's one way to kind of help yourself out. Here is a sample interactive lesson, basically just how you might manage the time to give you some kind of idea. You might have a warm-up for a few minutes where you would focus on key vocabulary, maybe reviewing it, maybe any grammar structure that is particularly important for that topic that you're delivering that day in order for them to understand. Remember, you're not going to just be a grammar teacher who stands up there and gives the rules. That's typically very boring for students, and that would not be something that I would expect an EMI instructor to do. But what you can do is call certain grammatical concept structures to mind, to kind of remind them. For example, the passive structure. You could remind them how useful it is in writing certain types of, for example, engineering reports or something like that. When to use the passive and how to use the passive are very important in English, and what they should notice when they're reading the passive as well. So not so much a grammar rule, but more of the usage of any key grammar points. And maybe you would review some key concepts. And then the mini lecture, maybe you talk for only 15 minutes, right? So that'll help you keep it short. Using a visual, could be just writing things on the board or having a PowerPoint, where you're able to highlight key concepts, help them notice the details. You might give them an outline, either digitally or in paper form, where they could fill in certain blanks as you go along, something to support them. Students at the beginning of your EMI course or program will need more support, most likely, than students at the end. Then maybe after your mini lecture, you have an interactive activity. It could be a group discussion. It could be different types of asking them to role play some situation. Again, if you're doing the meetings, you could ask them to role play, but something that has a deliverable, something tangible, so that they don't just kind of go off and just speak in their native language and kind of not pay attention to the task at hand. I mean, that's a typical concern with students, not just in an EMI class. And then in the summary, you can have main points, key vocabulary, any kind of final questions. That's one way that you can go about kind of structuring an EMI class time. Now, I mentioned interactivity, and so we can say a few things about that, and also just using technology in your EMI course. So maybe you've heard the word flipped learning. This has to do with flipped because in the traditional model, someone stands up and lectures for, maybe 45 minutes, and then answers a couple questions, and students do homework. Maybe they do their exercises for homework, right? Or some math problems or chemistry. In the flipped model, students learn the content at home. So they watch videos or they just read the book. And when they come to class time is prioritizing that, doing exercises together, having discussions together, some kind of group project. So that's why it's flipped. Technology is very useful for this because many places are making their own videos or finding videos that can be utilized, that exist online, but that are appropriate for the content and the English level your students do have. There are many different resources available online for vocabulary support. I've listed some of them here. I'm sure you'll have other ones. I do want to point out vocabulary.com has great lists of words. They're kind of like virtual index cards, but they're categorized. Other people have made them by field. So if you want to look up mechanical engineering, there's great lists right there. And then you can do some interactive, just learning the words on there. You can take someone else's list and assign it to students, or you can make your own list or modify someone's list. There's also CEFR profilers. So if you're looking for something to figure out what level, how to make your content appropriate for your level of students, maybe they're B2s, like I said, or B1s, those profilers are a good way to make sure that you're not giving students content that's too high. Lingro is an interesting one, and that is you can take a URL, so it has to be an online reading, let's say, put it into Lingro, and then all of the words are available in a glossary. So that can be really useful for students. And also academic word lists, just to make sure that they have the words that they need. That is going to be important. Instructional media, many of these you probably know, but if you have a little time, there is so much out there. These things can be used regardless of the language many times, but they are so helpful for learning. I really like Nearpod, where you can put your PowerPoint into Nearpod, upload it into Nearpod. These are free. And then you can narrate over the top of it. You can insert quizzes into there as well. So you can put that into your learning management system. I know you have this here, you all have this great web conferencing system, but if you can also have a learning management system such as Canvas or Blackboard, they're very useful as well for organizing your content. Even if you're not doing an online only class, these can be great, for example, for organizing for flipped classrooms, for example. So these are a list of some different resources that you can try out. I see that we have a question, so let me see if I can address this. In the context of EMI, can we say that comprehension and understanding and comprehending are the same thing? So I'm not exactly sure within what that would have to do with. I think within EMI, what I try to really stress is there are many things you could consider with it that are more theoretical. But I would really encourage you to focus on the very practical. So that's why I've been trying to give some suggestions and thought to help really think, because students typically are very practical with these choices that they're making. So they want to know, why should I do this? And how can I demonstrate? How can I get a job? How can I demonstrate that and feel comfortable and confident in these skill areas? They want to feel comfortable and confident when they enter the job market. So whether something's comprehension or understanding is probably less of a thing to students than whether or not they can perform something. Can they demonstrate these things? Can they do these things? What can you see that students can do that show you that they are ready to take that job with your degree on it? You know, your degree is on the student, that they can go forward and they can demonstrate certain things. So I really like the idea of demonstrating things. When you write your student learning objectives, I just recommend looking at, for example, Bloom's taxonomy and all the words there. That's one type of strategy you can use, which is very much like to be able to apply things, evaluate things, analyze things, demonstrate things, right? Less about just knowing things, more about doing things. What can you see? What can you see that they can do? Here's a question: how important is it to have courses offered in English language in each department? Well, that would depend on your situation, right? So if you are offering an EMI program, you're probably going to have several classes in English, but not all classes have to be in English. Again, it depends on what your students need when they get out and how they are entering your program. Are they entering already quite high? Do they need a lot of work? What is your plan? And so these questions all really come down to, what resources do you have available? What do your students, what kind of students can you recruit? Will you recruit? How much money do you have? These are really the way to think about a lot of those questions. I do have many instructional videos that I've put together for the U.S. State Department. So they have been quite generous with their time and funding for these types of projects. So you should, I think we'll be able to get you this PowerPoint, and then you'll see this link here where you can see several different videos on ways that you can try to plan your lessons and your course in English. So it has to do with those specifics for a course. How can you lecture in a way that's more interactive? How can you deliver more interactive in-class activities and things like that? If you're looking for those specific how-tos, you can go to this, this site that will be available. And then I also have a number of readings that you can do as well. I think we have some time for other questions. That was really where the basic outline of what I was hoping to be able to cover today, and I think that's the time we have. So let's see. Another question is how to work with EMI in a class of students with different levels. Yeah, different levels of English. That is definitely one of the challenges, and it's teaching is always that way, right? They always have different levels of something. So not only will they have different levels of content, knowledge, and background and understanding, your students, but they'll also have the different levels of English. One way to deal with that is certainly using technology. Another difficulty with, of course, English is some students might be, one half of your students, let's say, might be stronger with their listening and speaking, and the other half might be stronger with their reading and writing. So Again, the more you can get to know your students before class starts, that goes back to when we were talking about your needs assessment, the more you can develop an awareness of that, then you can plan for it. But in general, it's pretty typical that some students will be stronger reading and writing, and some will be stronger listening and speaking. So then, okay, how do you support that? Much of that support can come through online learning. If you know that some students are need more help with and support, for example, with listening, many videos, you can either add captions to the videos or you can turn on the captions on the videos. Teach them these strategies on how to utilize the different resources that are available to them so that they can learn. They have to, many times students have to be trained on how to learn in this environment. Teach them how they can watch a video for a few minutes, turn on the captions, go back and re-watch it, try watching it then with no captions to develop their listening skills. It's going to take time. And if students are at the beginning of a course or program, it's going to be helpful if you can give them a little extra time and reduce the amount of content that they have to cover. Many instructors do choose to, for a while, give them content in both languages. So, but still ensuring that they are looking at the English and experiencing the English. That is a choice that you can make as well. But yeah, if you can use technology to help with those environments, and also in interactive class time, you can structure it so that there are student groups, and you might choose to put a couple students who are stronger with speaking along with the quiet students and train them on how the stronger students in their speaking can help the more shy students or the lower proficiency students with speaking. That can be cultural. Some cultures don't like to do that at all. Other cultures are okay with that, where the students feel like they enjoy helping each other with those skills. But if you are going to do that, it's helpful if you just tell them what you're doing and why you're doing that, and that you know that part of this class is to get them more comfortable and build up their English skills, and be very honest about it. I find that that goes a long way as well. So when using EMI in the classroom, is the teacher supposed to work some aspect of the English language and the level of teachers' knowledge? So if you're using English in the classroom, let me go back to the slide where we had the, oh, here we go, lesson plan. It's a good idea to cover some English, but not to make it the focus, especially, for example, in your warm-up. So, for example, you might choose to, like I said, highlight some vocabulary. Maybe the students have already studied the vocabulary at home. You ask them to do some Quizlet exercises online. Maybe they even had to take a quiz at home and pass the quiz before class. And it could be an auto-graded quiz so that you don't have to worry about grading it. Multiple choice quiz for vocabulary. And then they get to class, you review those terms, you write them on the board, let's say, you pronounce them because pronunciation will be an important part. And then you go over a couple key concepts. Then during your mini lecture, when you are coming across those same key vocabulary words, either on your slides or the screen, you can go over them again. If your students need extra support for listening for the lecture time, you might give your students an outline of the lecture that you're going to have and teach them and put some blanks in there. And then whenever they're to the blank, stop and say, okay, now here, I'm going to talk about this. What are you going to put in that blank? And then let them work together with a partner, for example, to fill in the outline that you just did with the appropriate English word. And it should be a main word, right? Maybe one of the key vocabulary words. It's not the little parts of English that you care so much about. You really want to focus on and structure around these larger skills of being able to capture the main idea. So then they're learning how to listen for the main idea, for example. And then in the interactive activity, you can do the whole type of, you can kind of go over those skills again and talk to them specifically about speaking in English, about taking a risk with just trying to speak, right? Working on just on fluency, not worrying so much about specific pronunciation and always doing everything right, but just speaking. So it isn't that you have to give so many specific little details to English, but rather from a very big picture perspective that you identify a few things each class that you can help your students with, you tell them what they are, and then you give them those opportunities to do that. I think we might be, I don't know if there are any other questions or if we're wrapping up, what else can I do or answer here? Is there anything else I can say?
Hello again, Professor Down and everybody. I think we summarized all the questions. And again, I would like to thank you, Hugo Miranda, that it's supported us in doing that, and all the technical communication preparing this event. Hugo works with us at SRE. And so I would like to thank you again, Professor Down, for your time, and I hope we continue to work together in a remote way while it is necessary, but as soon as it is possible to have you with us at CEFET, it will be a very good pleasure, and I'm sure all the teachers wonder for that moment.
Wonderful. Thank you again, and best of luck, everyone. Just remember, it's a journey. There's no right or wrong way. Just put yourself forward and start trying it out. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. I continuo em português, just to finalize this. Gostaria de agradecer novamente a todo mundo, né, a participação, em assistindo, em interagindo, fazendo questionamentos para o professor Down. Gostaria de agradecer ao professor Flávio e à professora Celeste, que estiveram conosco no momento de abertura desse evento, e durante todo o nosso trabalho da SRI, eu não posso dizer nada menos do que a Diretoria-Geral nos dá todo o suporte. Tudo que a gente faz, os programas, as mobilidades, as bolsas para os alunos, os acordos, temos sempre o apoio da diretoria de uma maneira geral, o que é muito grato para nós, né? Eu convido novamente a todos para conferirem a programação do evento na página da SRI, sri@cefet-mg.br, e também conhecer um pouco do nosso trabalho, nossas ações e as oportunidades com os nossos parceiros internacionais. Adianto que essa tarde nós teremos 2 lives, eu já falei no início, mas vou falar novamente, porque uma pessoa que chegou mais tarde, né? Teremos uma mesa redonda às 14h30 com os parceiros da Embaixada da França, e às 17h30 uma palestra com a professora Luciane Stalivieri, da UFSC, especialista em internacionalização. Eu acho que ela tem muito a contribuir, inclusive porque o foco da palestra dela vai ser a preparação do CEFET para novos desafios. Novamente, eu agradeço o apoio técnico de todos os que trabalharam conosco, os da SECOM, né, que estiveram mais próximos, mas todos, o pessoal da DEDC, que nos ajudou a pensar algumas coisas, ao pessoal do Deltec, a todos os alunos e ex-alunos que se disponibilizaram a fazer transmissões gravadas conosco e a participar, a todos os servidores, docentes e técnico-administrativos que estiveram envolvidos, e em nome de toda a equipe da SRI, desejamos muita saúde para todo mundo e agradeço. Uma boa tarde para você que está nos assistindo e até breve.